Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's really great to have your company for another episode of the show. Now, as someone who's been coaching dentists for over a decade now, helping them grow and scale a business, the question I get asked very commonly is, what is it that separates the people that achieve great results with their practice compared to those that achieve mediocre results? And before I get into what it is and how you might want to think about it, I want to share with you what it's not, because there's some misconceptions, a few myths around this. Oftentimes people assume it's talent or intelligence or some sort of silver spoon being placed in their mouth at birth and having some sort of advantage in that regard. And my observation is it's none of those things. My observation that when it comes to commercial success, the people who go on to achieve wonderful things with their business, whether it's financial success, time success, creating leverage in their business, or just enjoying the journey a whole lot more, it comes back to their ability to take action on what they learn and the ability to implement or execute a plan. And that's really, really important. It's not just thinking about things, it's actually doing things. You don't build a reputation on what you say you're going to do. You build a reputation on what you actually do. And similarly, you don't build a great business on what you say or even what you learn. You build a great business on what you actually do. And I think that's really, really key. It comes back to the doing. It sounds really simple, right? But if it was simple, why is everyone not doing it? Well, it's simple, but it's not easy, right? If it was just a case of knowing what to do, then we wouldn't have any real problems in the world. We wouldn't have an obesity problem, for example. We know what causes people to put on weight. We know what the problems are. We also know what the solutions are, and yet we have an obesity problem. And so it tells us, therefore, that something else is at play, and it's a behavioral issue. Similarly, there's lots of problems that we could solve in the world without actually adding to our knowledge bank. It's going to come back to changes of behavior. So again, let's think about the behavior in your practice. If you want to achieve something different to what you're experiencing, then we're going to need to change our behaviors. So let's think about why people might change behaviors. Now, the first thing I want to share with you is this formula for change. And I learned this as a young man. One of my early mentors shared it with me, and it really ties into the fact that a lot of change is initiated when people just get fed up. They've had a gutful, right? They are so unhappy. They're in pain enough. And I don't necessarily mean physical pain, though it might be that. But usually it's some sort of mental or emotional pain. And they go, right, enough is enough is enough. I'm going to do something different. So what that formula looks like is when you have sufficient dissatisfaction, when you're really upset enough, basically. And equally, when you have a strong vision for what you want instead, and equally you know what those first steps are, when those things come together and they're greater than the resistance that you might encounter, then change occurs, right? And I remember really vividly experiencing this during COVID. I remember, like everyone else, the lockdowns and so on. And during those lockdowns, staying at home all that time, I would walk past the kitchen countless times a day. And I got into this really bad habit of snacking. And I don't quite know why I did it. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe I honestly don't know. But not surprisingly, I put on some weight. And as the weight went on, my dissatisfaction level grew and grew and grew. And it grew to a point where one day I went, righto, that's it, no more. I don't like how I feel. I don't like how I look. Something has to change, and I'm ready for that change. So my dissatisfaction level was at an all-time high. The vision I had for what I wanted to feel like, look like, was clear. I knew exactly what weight I wanted to be. I knew what the first steps were. And so the combination of those three things was greater than any resistance I was experiencing. So I got on with the job. And as a consequence, I was able to shift that weight and then some and get back to a weight that I hadn't been for a lot of years. So I guess what I'm trying to say is those ingredients, when they come together, really give you the impetus to change. If you're in your practice and you're unhappy with where you are, I guess the point I'm trying to say is you've got to be unhappy enough that level of pain, staying in that situation hurts more than doing what is required to build the business you actually do really want. Because it is going to take some work, and we need to let you know that up front. But that work won't occur if you're not, going to be motivated enough to make the change. So something there for you. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing that really separates those people that get on and do great things with a business, as I said, it's all around action, implementing what they learn and executing plans and taking action on the things that they understand. Well, that comes back to being accountable, taking ownership, and ultimately being responsible for their actions and their outcomes. They're not looking to blame other people. They're not making excuses. They're not living in denial. They're realistic. They're clear-eyed. They know what's working. They know what's not. And so when you see that people living what we call above the line, where there's ownership, accountability, and responsibility, they're usually solution-focused. They're results-driven. They've got clarity about what they're after. They're motivated. They're driven, and they accept the reality for what it is, and they make the changes, right? But if you compare that to people who live below the line, where blame, excuses, and denial live, there's often vague outcomes that people are after. There's often judgment. There's often a bit of apathy. And rather than being solution-focused, they are problem-focused, and they tend to make excuses, right? And so what ends up happening is people below the line end up as victims, and people above the line end up experiencing victory. And so it really comes back to, if you're going to take action on these things, you've got to be responsible, not just for the actions, but for the outcomes as well. And when you come with that mindset of being solution-focused rather than problem-focused, you're going to get stuff done. You're going to move the needle. You're going to take action on the things you learn and implement or execute a plan, and then you're going to see the results. And of course, there'll be a lag between the actions and the results, and you need to understand what we call invisible progress versus visible progress. But you've got to do those things for a little while before you start to see the results. It's like going to the gym. Like if I go to the gym every day for a week, I'm not going to, if I've gone in, fat and overweight, it's going to take more than a week of exercising for me to get a six-pack, right? We know that there's a lag between activity and outcome, and we need to accept that with our business. So we need to be able to implement and execute that plan consistently over a period of time, and then we'll see the results. So understand that lag, understand that there's going to be invisible progress before you get to the visible progress. So again, key understanding there. So the third thing I wanted to share with you around what is it that allows people to implement and execute plans really well so they achieve fantastic things in their business comes back to identity. And it's really interesting. The identity piece is a tricky one, right? Because how we see ourselves is how we act. We always act in congruence with our identity. One of the things that I notice is that we sometimes talk to or have conversations with dentists who identify first and foremost as clinicians, and when it comes to running their business, they find it hard to make the changes because they're still seeing themselves as a clinician. Now, just to be clear, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you give up the identity of being a clinician, but what I do want to share with you is that all progress begins with the death, or at least the partial death, of an identity. And we need to be able to take on new identities. And the new identity is really going to be around being that of a business owner. When you have your identity, that's going to be linked to your values and your beliefs, the skills that you either have or seek to acquire. And what's going to happen, that's going to come to represent who you are, your sense of self, right? That new identity is going to show up on the outside through the actions that you take, the behaviors that you embody, the decisions that you make, and it's going to really impact the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, which, as we said, is the precursor to having the things that you want to have, which are the dreams you have, the results you're seeking to achieve, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things you might be asking yourself was, well, that's all really well and good, Jesse, but how do I shift my identity? And it's a really good question, and it's a tricky one, to be honest, because you've probably spent years identifying as a clinician. And if I'm saying to you, well, now we need to take on the identity of business owner, if you want to have a business that is a true business rather than a self-employed situation where you're kind of working for wages in your own practice, if you want to have a business that gives you, not just money, but time as well, then you've got to create a true business, right? And that means a new identity. And so how do you change that? Well, part of that is actually repeating to yourself the attributes and the abilities that new identity would embody. And that might be done through a series of affirmations and other things like that. And I can assure you that over time, that will shift the way that you see yourself. You'll shift your sense of beliefs that you have about yourself and the values that you hold so that they align with this new identity. And when you have that shift in identity, then you'll have the shift in the behaviors and the actions and the decisions. And once you do that, then you'll see your dreams and results change to reflect the things that you want rather than things that you've had in the past. So again, it's a tricky one, but it's a very important one. And so coming back to, again, the big question, what is it, Jesse, that separates those people that achieve fantastic things in their business? As I said, it's their ability to execute a plan or implement what they learn. And that's going to come back to, yes, the identity, the shift in identity, because once you've got that, whether it's skills, beliefs, or values that need to shift, that's going to manifest, as I say, in actions, behaviors, and decisions, which is going to move you in the right direction. Equally, it's about taking full ownership, full accountability, full responsibility for not just the actions, but for the outcomes, and being a problem solver, being solution focused, rather than living in blame, denial, or excuses, and being problem focused. So being above the line more than below the line. And every single one of us can slip below the line because we're human, right? But the people who achieve more live above the line more. And then finally, we spoke about that formula for change where those three ingredients, the level of dissatisfaction is such that you're really annoyed and frustrated and things have to change, coupled with a compelling vision for your future or clear vision for your future, and knowing what those first steps are. When those three things come together and is greater than the resistance you might be experiencing around making those changes, then you are absolutely primed to make some changes in your life. So I hope you find that helpful. I hope you find that thought-provoking. And again, if it is thought-provoking, or if indeed you've got a question, hit me up on the socials. I'd love to get your feedback about what you took away from this episode. And I can't wait to see you again very shortly. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessegreen.com and download the free report.